So who would like to start speaking for the session?
I can start.
Are you okay with that, Roger, if Theresa starts?
Okay.
And you're okay if I call you by your first names? We didn't actually agree to that. It's okay if I call you Theresa?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Roger. Okay. Well, look, first of all, Theresa, thank you very much for just explaining that situation from your perspective. And if it's okay with you, I'll just go through it again just to make sure that I've understood what it is that you've said. So if I understood correctly, you've started at Active Insure about 9 months ago, hired directly by Mary, that it was a new division that was starting up in digital research and development, and that new division had a couple of goals. One of them was to look for new revenue, but also to avoid losing business. So that was the reason why it was set up. So your background is not actually in insurance, but you are experienced in the area of digital transformations, and so you were actually quite excited to be starting this role in this area. And so that's what I really feel, that there's quite some enthusiasm about that. And also you mentioned that you've got this team that you've picked of 6 people, which that you're happy to be managing that team. So that came as well. Since you started working, you're working with Roger, who's responsible for direct marketing. Although you say initially that the contact was somewhat positive, that was good to begin with, very quickly you felt that because of maybe from your perspective, you see as different personalities, and that there's a certain tension that came between you. And I think from the way you're looking at it, you talked about the fact that for you get the impression that you're not appreciated for what you're bringing in your knowledge, because you don't know about insurance, and that from you believe that Roger looks at you as kind of a junior employee. And so that came across as quite clear.
He doesn't recognize at all my experience.
So you have this experience in digital transformation, and that you feel that because you're not knowledgeable in insurance, that it's not coming across in your relationship with Roger.
Exactly.
You also mentioned that it has an impact on your teams, that your teams are feeling some effect on. We might talk about that later as well, but that sounded important. Mary, who's your boss of both of you, is looking for you to collaborate, and that you're working also with Kevin, who's in another department, and you are working effectively with Kevin. That's working quite well at the moment. And I think also what I hear you saying is that you're kind of asking yourself, why is this problematic? You kind of got a question in, why is this a problem today in your relationship with Roger? And so hopefully over the course of the conversation today, we'll have a chance to talk about that. And then you also mentioned a recent project that didn't go well, and we might get a chance to talk about that as well in more detail. Okay. Does that sound fairly fair representation of what it was that you said?
Absolutely.
Okay. We'll get a chance to come back to you maybe in a short while, but maybe Roger, you've heard what Theresa has said. The one thing I'd say just to begin with is that Theresa has kind of recounted from her perspective the situation that she's gone through. First of all, I appreciate the fact that you let her tell her perspective. So I really appreciate that. It's very important here, and what normally happens is it's very easy to respond to what Theresa said, and so that's not the intention. I really want to hear from your experience what you've lived at Active Insure this last while, and hear how you've gone through those things, what important events have happened, and how you see them, but not necessarily to respond directly to what Theresa said. So whenever, in your own time. Okay. It's okay if I maybe repeat back to you, Roger, what I heard, but also if this is a good moment maybe to do that for you. I feel that there's obviously some. It's a very live subject for you, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to express some of what's behind. But the intention of the process here is indeed to have an open discussion and to see if there are and whether there are possibilities to see what the future might be. So we can't promise anything, but we can at least explore together. So I'll just read back to you what I heard. And so you've been at active in Shaw for 20 years. You were hired by the previous director before Mary. Mary had arrived about 10 years ago. And you have a very good working relationship with Mary. You also mentioned that you kind of started kind of ground up in marketing, and you got to the head of the department now for your function in direct marketing. You have a very strong team. You're particularly proud of the fact that you have a very strong team, and
we are quite respected within the company.
And well respected, and also the expression you used maybe a couple of times is also about being a well-oiled machine, and so that's something that efficiency was something that you see as quite important. And despite the issues with the pandemic, you still managed to see an increase in sales, and that you also found it somewhat difficult to hear Theresa's version of the situation, and that's indeed why we have the conversation today. Is indeed to see what we can express together and see how we can get a slightly different view from where we're standing, and it can be difficult to listen to be very frank. You also talked about the importance of setting up of this R&D group and how you understood that it was important for the organization and important to actually move with the time, so that
Yes.
you agreed, as both of you did, in terms of this R&D group. And that with hiring more people, I think you sound like there's somebody in your team that you had been lining up for a position like this. Didn't quite work out that way.
I thought it was the obvious choice, but Mary has the right to disagree with that.
Okay, and so that was something that maybe that's information that's being shared for the first time today here. So in terms of the organization that you had, things from your perspective kind of stopped working, and you're not quite sure why. And that question that you asked about the why, that's something that you both share. This question of, well, what actually happened, what went wrong, and our goal here today is to try and uncover a little bit that, but also to see how we can look to the future. One of the things that you talked about was not being able to effectively see into the future what can happen, and hopefully the process today is an opportunity to do that. You also mentioned that Mary appreciates your input and your views, and you feel respected for your work within the company, and you take your job really seriously to run a very efficient operation, and that is important for you to do that. That your door is open, and that you would like to have a good working relationship. But in this most recent situation where things went wrong, you felt from your perspective that Theresa went behind your back to make this thing happen, and we'll probably have a chance to talk about that also in a bit of detail. I was particularly struck by that question of the not knowing where to go next, and what's really key in the conversation we're going to have today is just to work out if indeed there is a possible way to do that and how you might be able to move forward. You also mentioned that from your perspective, you think that Theresa has no interest in what you have to offer and the skills and experience that you have, and it sounds like that's kind of important for you, that your experience and your skills are recognized, and so that's difficult for you to see that's not necessarily what you're feeling as being reciprocated. So we'll have a chance to talk about that as well as we go through the session today.